There is a kind of strength that looks like invulnerability, but functions as a cage. A person learns somewhere in their life that to survive, they must be unbreakable. That to be worthy, they must need nothing. That to be respected, they must never show the places where they are hurting. And so they build walls, they harden themselves, they become the person who can handle anything, who never falls apart, who is always, always fine. But there is a price written into this strength, a cost that no one talks about. The cost of never allowing yourself to be held, the cost of meeting every crisis alone. The cost of a nervous system that has learned that showing weakness is dangerous, that asking for help is failure, that admitting you are struggling is the same as admitting you are weak. The person who is always strong becomes someone who is slowly breaking, not visibly, not all at once, but incrementally, through years of not allowing themselves to rest, not allowing themselves to be human, not allowing themselves to simply say, I cannot do this alone. And this breaking wears 1,000 faces. Depression that feels like emptiness, anxiety that masquerades as vigilance, rage that emerges from nowhere, numbness that feels like peace. A life that looks successful on the outside while crumbling on the inside. This is the story of what happens when strength becomes a prison. This is the story of the cost of always being strong. Chapter 1. Recognition, emotional beginning. There is a way of carrying yourself through the world that reads as strength but feels like drowning. The person who is always strong has learned to function at a level most people cannot sustain. They get up when they have no energy. They solve problems when they are barely holding together. They show up for others when they are falling apart inside. And they do all of this while maintaining a facade of competence, control, and quiet capability. To the outside world, they look fine, more than fine. They look like someone who has it figured out, someone who does not crack, someone whose strength is a gift to others. They can be counted on, depended on, trusted to handle what comes, and they are proud of this, or at least they believe they should be. But inside, there is a different story. Inside, there is exhaustion that sleep does not touch. There is anger that has nowhere to go. There is sadness that was never allowed to be expressed, and now comes out as numbness. There is a heart that has learned not to feel, because feeling was always too dangerous, too revealing, too costly. The always strong person has often learned this strength young. Maybe they had a parent who could not handle emotions, so they learned to suppress their own. Maybe they were told that crying was weakness, that needing was selfish, that the only acceptable way to exist was to be useful. Maybe they grew up watching someone they loved struggle, and they decided that they would never be that vulnerable. They would be strong, they would protect everyone, they would never be a burden. And so they became unbreakable. But here is what no one tells you about being unbreakable. It is lonely. When you cannot show your cracks, no one can comfort them. When you cannot admit you are struggling, no one can help. When you cannot allow yourself to need, connection becomes impossible. You are strong, and you are utterly, completely alone. The always strong person often does not recognize this loneliness because they are so busy maintaining the strength. They are running on fumes, but they do not call it that. They are barely eating, but they do not say they are struggling. They are lying awake at night with anxiety, but they smile and say they are fine. They are falling apart, but they keep getting up, keep showing up, keep being the person everyone else can depend on. And slowly, imperceptibly, they begin to disappear. Not physically, but the person underneath the strength, the one with hopes and fears and vulnerabilities, gets smaller and smaller. The person who laughs easily fades. The person who can be moved becomes numb. The person who could once be surprised by joy now experiences only the flatness of exhaustion. They are succeeding by every external measure, but inside, something is breaking, and they do not know how to stop the breaking without stopping the strength. And if they stop the strength, who will they be? Chapter 2. Root Cause Origins. Every person who is always strong has learned this from somewhere. Some learned it from a parent who could not handle emotions, a mother struggling with depression, overwhelmed by her own feelings, unable to be present for her child's emotions, a father trained in the belief that feelings are weakness, that a man's job is to be impassive and unmoved. These parents did not teach their children to be strong through the words. They taught through absence, through the failure to comfort, through the message delivered in silence. Your feelings are too much. Handle it yourself. Some learned it from a family that rewarded only achievement, where love was conditional on productivity, where showing vulnerability was met with criticism or dismissal, where the only acceptable way to exist was to be useful, to accomplish, to never need. These children learned that they had worth only insofar as they were doing something. And if they were struggling, they were failing. And if they were failing, they were unworthy. Some learned it from trauma, from a situation where being strong meant survival, where showing fear meant danger, where the only way to stay safe was to shut down emotion and keep moving. The nervous system learned to suppress, to harden, to become a wall against the world. And what saved them then continues to run now, even when there is no danger. And some learned it from culture, from systems that glorify independence and self-sufficiency, that say a real man does not cry, that say a real woman does not ask for help, that say strength is independence and weakness is vulnerability. They absorbed these messages from every direction, from movies, from family, from the way the world treats people who admit they are struggling. The root cause is always the same. A nervous system that learned that vulnerability is dangerous. When a child's emotions are not met with understanding, when their needs are not responded to, when their expression of pain is ignored or punished, they learn something profound. They learn that feeling is not safe. That showing what is inside will not bring comfort, but rejection. That the safest thing to do is to lock everything down, to become hard, to become strong. And they become very good at this. They develop the capacity to function despite exhaustion, to continue despite despair, to manage despite being at the breaking point. This is not weakness. This is actually a kind of incredible strength. They have learned how to survive in a world that did not take care of them. But survival is not the same as living, and the strength that was meant to help them survive becomes the thing that prevents them from truly being alive. The always strong person often comes from a lineage of always strong people. A parent who is always strong, passing it to their child. A grandmother who never showed weakness, modeled for her daughter how to endure without expressing. Generation after generation of people who learned that the way to be worthy was to be unbreakable. Breaking this cycle feels impossible because it means admitting that the strength that held the family together was also what kept it apart. Chapter 3. Scientific Psychological Explanation. When a person chronically suppresses their emotions, something measurable happens in the brain. The amygdala, the threat detection center, remains in a state of heightened activation. The nervous system is constantly scanning for danger because in the person's early learning, emotions were dangerous. So the body stays in a state of low-level alert, muscles tense. Cortisol levels remain elevated, sleep becomes difficult. The immune system weakens. Meanwhile, the parts of the brain responsible for emotional processing and regulation become less developed. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making, self-awareness, and emotional control, shows reduced activation in areas related to feeling and empathy. The limbic system, the emotional center, becomes fragmented. Emotional signals are sent, but they are not processed. They are suppressed. This suppression is not free. It costs cognitive resources. When someone is actively suppressing emotions, their working memory is impaired. They cannot think as clearly. They cannot remember as well. They cannot process complex information as effectively. This is why people who are suppressing emotions often experience mental fog, difficulty concentrating, and a sense of being mentally exhausted even when they have rested. Research on emotional suppression shows that it is associated with worse outcomes than almost any other emotion regulation strategy. People who suppress emotions have higher rates of depression and anxiety, worse relationship quality, lower social support, more physical health problems, increased substance abuse, higher suicide risk, particularly in men. Emotional suppression is also bidirectional in relationships. When one person suppresses their emotions, their partner senses it. The partner experiences the emotional distance, the relationship becomes strained. Over time, the person who is suppressing becomes isolated because the very strategy they are using to stay safe is pushing everyone away. Burnout occurs when this suppression goes on for too long. The nervous system can only run in overdrive for so long before it crashes. Burnout is not a simple sign of stress. It is a sign of prolonged, unrelenting stress combined with the suppression of any emotional response to that stress. When burnout hits, the person experiences a collapse. Not a breakdown in the sense of falling apart, but a systemic shutdown. The body can no longer maintain the facade. Depression sets in, anxiety spikes, numbness becomes the default state. The person who is always strong suddenly cannot function, and they do not understand how this happened, because they were fine. They were managing. They were strong. But the brain and body have a limit. When demands exceed the person's capacity to meet them, when there is no rest, no support, no space to feel, the system breaks down. This is not weakness. This is biology. The human nervous system was not designed to suppress emotion indefinitely. It was designed to feel, to respond, to recover. The good news is that the brain is neuroplastic. It can change. With safety, with support, with permission to feel, new neural pathways develop. The amygdala calms down. The prefrontal cortex becomes more active. Emotional processing centers come online. The person can, over time, integrate strength with vulnerability. They can learn that feeling does not mean breaking. Chapter 4. Inner Conflict. Resistance. The always strong person lives in a profound paradox. They have made themselves strong to survive, and now that strength is the thing that is slowly destroying them. They believe that if they allow themselves to rest, they will not get back up. They believe that if they admit they are struggling, everything will fall apart. They believe that vulnerability equals failure. And yet the person inside is desperate for connection, for rest, for someone to notice that they are not fine, for permission to stop carrying everything alone. But there is a part of them that resists this desperately, because accepting help means admitting weakness. And admitting weakness means everything they have built, everything they have sacrificed was unnecessary. It means the pain they endured in the name of becoming strong was wrong. This is an impossible situation. The always strong person often finds themselves in relationships where they are loved for what they do, not for who they are. Their partners appreciate their reliability, their competence, their ability to manage. But the partners do not really know them, because the person has not shown themselves, and as a result, the relationship, while functional, lacks intimacy. It lacks the vulnerability that makes love real. The always strong person also often experiences a deep ambivalence toward their own emotions. They are terrified of feeling too much, because if they start feeling, they might not be able to stop. The emotions have been building for so long that they are afraid of what will happen if they finally allow expression. So they use enormous amounts of mental energy to keep everything locked down. and this mental energy is energy that could be used for living. There is also a resistance to rest. The always strong person often feels guilty when they are not working, not accomplishing, not doing something. Rest feels like laziness. Taking time for themselves feels selfish. And so they do not rest. They keep pushing. They keep managing. They keep going until their body forces them to stop. And there is anger. There is deep anger at the people and systems that taught them that strength means never needing, never showing, never being vulnerable. And this anger has nowhere to go because showing anger feels like showing weakness. So it gets repressed too. And the person becomes increasingly irritable, increasingly short-tempered, increasingly likely to snap at the people they love. The paradox is that the very strategy the person is using to keep themselves safe is the thing that is making them unsafe. They are isolated by their strength. They are exhausted by their resilience. They are dying slowly from the chronic suppression of their own humanity. Chapter 5. Turning point. Realization. The breaking point comes in different ways for different people. Sometimes it comes through illness. The body, exhausted from years of being pushed, stops working. There is a health crisis that cannot be ignored, and suddenly, the person has to stop. They have to be still. And in that stillness, everything they have been suppressing comes up. Sometimes it comes through relationship breakdown. The person they love finally leaves, unable to sustain intimacy with someone who cannot let them in. Or their child says something that breaks their heart, something that shows the cost of their emotional unavailability. And in that moment, they recognize what their strength has cost. Sometimes it comes through simple exhaustion. One day they cannot get out of bed. Not because they have the flu, but because something inside has given up. The body and mind are saying, "No more, you cannot do this anymore." And sometimes it comes through therapy. Someone finally reflecting back to them what everyone else can see, that they are drowning, that they are not fine, that the strength they have been maintaining is costing them everything. The turning point is not always a moment of insight. It is often a moment of breaking. And in that breaking, something shifts. The person realizes for the first time that they cannot do this alone, that their strength, the thing they have relied on, is not enough, that they need help. And this realization is both devastating and liberating. It is devastating because it means admitting that everything they have built their identity on, their strength, their invulnerability, their ability to manage, was not actually protecting them. It was isolating them. But it is liberating because for the first time they give themselves permission to stop, to rest, to let someone see that they are struggling, to admit that they need, and in that admission, something fundamental shifts. They are no longer alone, they are still scared, they are still unsure, but they are no longer carrying this by themselves. Chapter 6. Healing Integration. Healing from the wound of always being strong is about learning a new relationship with strength. It is not about becoming weak. It is not about no longer being resilient. It is about learning that true strength includes vulnerability. That real resilience includes knowing when to ask for help. That genuine power includes the capacity to admit struggle. It looks like learning to cry. For someone who has spent decades not allowing tears, this can feel revolutionary. Crying becomes not a sign of weakness, but a sign that something is finally being felt. That the suppression is lifting, that the person is coming back to life. It looks like admitting struggle, saying to someone you trust, "I am not okay. I need help." And sitting with the discomfort of being known, of being dependent, of being vulnerable, and discovering that the other person does not leave, that they do not judge, that they actually come closer. It looks like learning to rest without guilt. Taking a day off without feeling like you are failing. Sleeping in without the internal voice saying you are being lazy. Spending time with no productive output without feeling worthless. It looks like rebuilding relationships. Being present with the people you love in a new way. Sharing not just the accomplishments but the struggles, allowing them to support you. Creating genuine intimacy instead of just companionship. It looks like learning a new way of working. Understanding that productivity does not have to come from pushing beyond capacity. That you can accomplish things while also taking care of yourself. That rest is not the opposite of productivity. It is a prerequisite for sustainable, meaningful work. It looks like grieving. Grieving the years spent in isolation. Grieving the relationships damaged by emotional unavailability. Grieving the self that was lost in the effort to be strong. And then slowly finding that self again. Or discovering who you are when you are not trying to be unbreakable. It involves meeting with a therapist or trusted person who can help you understand where this need to be strong came from. Who can help you see that it was not your responsibility to be your own parent, your own caregiver, your own support system. Who can help you practice being vulnerable in a safe space. It involves building a life that includes rest, connection, joy, and play, not as frivolous extras, but as essential parts of a life well lived, not as something you earn through productivity, but as your birthright as a human being. Chapter 7, Poetic Closure Reflection. There is a particular kind of strength that looks like softness. It is the strength of someone who has been broken and chosen to heal. The strength of someone who has admitted their limits and learned to work within them. The strength of someone who can cry and still get up. Who can ask for help and still be capable. Who can be vulnerable and still be whole. True strength is not the absence of emotion. It is the presence of wisdom about which emotions to express, which battles to fight, which moments require softness, and which require steadiness. The person who is always strong, who learned to be invulnerable as a survival strategy, can become someone who is integrated, someone who can access their own power without denying their own humanity, someone who can accomplish and rest, who can lead and follow, who can be strong for others while also allowing others to be strong for them. This is not weakness. This is maturity. This is what real strength looks like. If you recognize yourself in this story, if you know the exhaustion of always being strong, know this: your strength has value. The resilience you developed, the capacity to endure, the ability to keep going when things were hard, these saved you. They are real gifts. But those gifts were meant to work alongside other capacities, alongside the capacity to feel, to rest, to ask for help, to admit struggle, to be human. You can keep your strength. You do not have to become weak to become whole. But you can soften. You can allow yourself to be held. You can let someone see the places where you are breaking and still be whole. You can be strong and vulnerable at the same time. And in that integration, you find something you have been missing: connection, peace, the ability to rest without guilt, the experience of being known and loved not for what you do but for who you are. The person who was always strong becomes the person who is finally free. Not free from the need to be capable, but free from the belief that capability requires invulnerability. Free to live fully, free to be human. And in that freedom, you discover a strength that is deeper, more resilient, and far more beautiful than anything you had to push yourself to become. The walls come down, and you discover that you were never unbreakable. You were always, always worth being held.